I no longer consider her my daughter. A lowly, stupid grunt throwing herself into the mud to act as a meat shield for others. From this moment on, please don't let anyone mention that unlucky name to dirty my ears. That text message was not a curse from an enemy combatant. It was sent by Richard Brooks, my biological father. I stared at the family group chat. My own sister Vanessa dropped a heart emoji on that vicious text. Not a word of protest. Not a single letter typed in my defense. Just a tiny red heart stamped onto a death sentence. My brother replied as coldly as if he were closing a business contract. Understood, father. And the next second the screen flashed the words that buried me alive. You have been removed from the group. I am a major in the United States Army Special Forces. I once gritted my teeth and stitched up my own torn flesh from a shrapnel wound without shedding a single tear. But in that moment, sitting alone in a dark barracks room, staring at my cracked phone screen, it felt like someone had shoved a live grenade with the pin pulled straight into my chest. Not a single word of defense from anyone who shared my blood. They threw me away like low-class trash simply because I chose to wear a military uniform. That night, the billionaire Brooks family was certain this unlucky daughter was dead in the dirt. But they forgot one thing: never push a special forces officer into a corner. They had no idea that this ruthless knight had just initiated a silent campaign that would last 4 years. Before I tell you how I turned the tables, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel, but only if you genuinely enjoy this story. Also, please let me know your location and local time in the comments. I would love to know where you are listening from. To understand why that text message detonated inside my chest the way it did, I need to take you back to when I was 18 years old. Back when I was still the golden child of the Brooks dynasty. I carried a 4.1 GPA. Full-ride medical scholarship to the University of Virginia. My father paraded me around his golf buddies at the Westbrook Country Club like a prized racehorse, sliding his arm around my shoulder and announcing to anyone within earshot that his youngest daughter was going to be a surgeon. He printed my acceptance letter and had it framed behind glass in his home office right next to his banking awards. Every Sunday dinner, he reminded the table that I was the Brooks family investment that would pay off the most. Not his daughter, his investment. I spent every waking hour of my senior year buried in AP textbooks, surviving on 4 hours of sleep and black coffee, my hands shaking during finals week because the thought of dropping below a 4.0 made my stomach fold in on itself. I was not studying to become a doctor. I was performing the role of a trophy, and I did not even know it yet. My sister Vanessa had already graduated from her plastic surgery residency. My brother Brandon had just made junior partner at a defense contracting law firm. I was the final piece of my father's collection, the last trophy for the shelf. The day everything cracked open, I was crossing a 4-lane intersection 3 blocks from my high school. A rusted pickup truck ran the red light doing 60. I heard the horn blast, and my legs locked. A man I had never seen before, a heavy-set veteran in a faded army jacket with a PTSD service dog, pulling at its leash on the curb, threw himself off the sidewalk and shoved me out of the path of the grill. The truck caught him instead. The impact threw him 15 feet across the asphalt. I hit the ground on my elbows and rolled. When I looked up, the man was lying face down in a spreading pool of dark red. His dog was howling, pulling its leash toward the body. I crawled to him on my hands and knees. I pressed my palms into the wound on his side, feeling the warm blood pump through my fingers in surges that got weaker each second. His eyes were open, staring up at the sky, already glazing. He did not know my name. I did not know his. A worn V, a hospital bracelet hung from his wrist. He died on that asphalt before the ambulance turned the corner. A complete stranger bled out on a public road to keep me breathing. A man this country had already thrown away. A veteran with a service dog and a hospital bracelet who still had enough fight left in him to save a kid he had never met. 2 weeks later, I stood in a cemetery watching an American flag fold over his casket. I had looked up his name in the police report. Staff Sergeant Michael Dunn. 2 tours in Iraq. Honorable discharge. Divorced. Living in a 1-bedroom apartment above a laundromat with his service dog. 14 people attended his funeral. His ex-wife stood in the back, sunglasses on, arms crossed. A few guys from his old unit stood shoulder to shoulder near the grave, their backs straight. The service dog sat at the foot of the casket and did not move. I stood in the last row, gripping my medical textbooks against my chest, feeling the weight of them like concrete blocks. The nation had enough plastic surgeons for the rich. It did not have enough people willing to hold the line for strangers like Michael Dunn. I walked out of that cemetery, sat on a bench in the parking lot, pulled out my phone, and declined the UVA scholarship. The confirmation email came back in under a minute. 4 years of perfect grades erased with one tap. I felt the weight lift off my shoulders before the screen went dark. I called my father that evening. I stood in the driveway of our house, pacing beside his parked Cadillac, and told him flatly that I was enlisting in the United States Army. The line went dead. I pressed the phone harder against my ear and counted. 17 seconds of dead silence. I heard his breathing shallow and rapid, like a man watching his stock portfolio crash in real time. Then his voice came through the speaker, low trembling, dripping with absolute venom. "You smeared ashes and mud on the Brooks name." The line clicked dead. He hung up on me. I lowered the phone, slid my hands into my jacket pockets, and walked 3 blocks to the Army recruiting station. The fluorescent lights inside buzzed against the ceiling. A sergeant behind the desk looked up from his paperwork. I told him I wanted to enlist. He studied my face for a moment, then slid a form across the counter. I picked up the pen, and the hand that signed the paper did not shake. I did not hear from my father for 6 weeks after that phone call. No voicemail, no text. My mother did not call either. She had always operated as his silent enforcer, the woman who kept the peace by siding with the loudest voice. Vanessa sent a single message that read, "Dad is furious. Fix this." I did not reply. Brandon never acknowledged it at all. He was too busy billing defense contractors at $400 an hour to care about his youngest sister throwing away a medical career. By the time I earned my commission and shipped out for my first deployment, the Brooks family had already begun building the wall that would eventually lock me out completely. Thanksgiving, 2019. I came home on brief leave from a brutal deployment in the Middle East. I was a captain. A fresh bullet grazed burned red across my left bicep, still bandaged under my dress uniform sleeve. The wound throbbed every time I moved my arm. I had been back on American soil for less than 48 hours. I walked into my father's dining room. Crystal chandeliers threw blinding white light across the mahogany table. 14 place settings, bone china, sterling silver, 3 kinds of wine glasses at every seat. The smell of roasted turkey and expensive candle wax hit me the second I crossed the threshold. I scanned the table for my name card. I walked the full length of the table, checking every seat. My name was not there. Vanessa's name was written in gold calligraphy. Brandon's was next to our father's right hand. Even the partners from Brandon's law firm had name cards with little gold borders. My name was nowhere. My father stepped out of the kitchen holding a glass of single malt scotch. He wore a cashmere sweater and pressed slacks. He looked at my dress uniform the way a man looks at a stain on his carpet. His eyes traveled from my boots to the bandage peeking out from under my sleeve. He did not ask about the wound. He did not ask about the deployment. He did not ask if I was okay. He took a sip of his scotch and delivered his line without blinking. "The main table is full, Cheryl. Military families are used to suffering. Sitting there shouldn't be a problem, right?" He pointed to a rickety metal folding table shoved into the corner of the room, wedged between a potted plant and the wall. My sister's 2 screaming toddlers were already seated there, smearing cranberry sauce across their bibs and dropping food on the carpet. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I pulled out the wobbling metal chair, sat down, and ate a piece of cold turkey in total silence, while the rest of the Brooks family clinked crystal glasses 10 feet away. Vanessa glanced at me once from the main table, her lips curling into a small, satisfied smile before she turned back to her plate. Brandon carved the turkey with theatrical precision, his gold cufflinks catching the chandelier, light laughing at something my father said about a stock he had shorted. Nobody looked at the corner. Nobody passed me the gravy. The 2-year-old next to me threw a spoonful of mashed potatoes onto my sleeve. I wiped it off with a napkin and kept eating. That Christmas, I spent 3 weeks of my leave braiding a Zippo lighter with military paracord. The pattern was a survival weave, the kind you pull apart in the field when you need cordage to set a tourniquet or rig a shelter. I tied each knot by hand, testing the tension, making sure the weave was tight enough to hold under stress. It was the most personal gift I had ever made. In a combat zone, that lighter could mean the difference between freezing to death and making it through the night. I handed it to my father on Christmas morning. The rest of the family was unwrapping designer watches and cashmere scarves. He picked up my gift with 2 fingers, holding it away from his body like a piece of roadkill. He turned it over once, his lip curling, his nostrils tightening. Crude and reeks of mud. He sneered and tossed it onto a side table without looking at it again. Brandon laughed from the couch. Vanessa did not even look up from her new handbag. 3 months later, I found that lighter kicked under the rear tire of his car in the dusty garage. A thin layer of grime coated the paracord. Tire marks crossed the braiding, where someone had backed over it. I picked it up, wiped it on my sleeve, and put it in my cargo pocket. I carried it on my next deployment. That lighter started fires in 3 different countries. It saved a soldier's life in a rainstorm when we needed heat and had nothing else. My father's trash became someone else's lifeline. The final exclusion came before the complete break. My father's 60th birthday. He rented out a 5-star restaurant downtown, the kind of place where the appetizers cost more than a sergeant's daily pay. White tablecloths, a private chef, a jazz trio in the corner. I packed my bag to attend. I pressed my only civilian dress. I booked a last-minute flight from Fort Liberty and put the ticket on my military credit card. Then my phone rang. Vanessa's voice was flat and rehearsed, like she was reading from a script my father had handed her. She informed me the restaurant only had 6 reserved seats. She listed who was coming. My father, my mother, Brandon, Brandon's wife, Vanessa herself, and Vanessa's boyfriend of 3 weeks. She paused, then added with a small satisfied exhale, "No room for crude camo." I stood in my barracks room, holding the phone, staring at the half-packed duffel bag on my bed. The flight confirmation email still glowed on my laptop screen. I set the phone down without saying goodbye. I unpacked the dress. I hung it back in the closet. I canceled the flight and ate the fee. I laced up my combat boots, grabbed my gym bag, and walked to the base gym. I hit the heavy bag for 2 hours straight until my knuckles bled through the wraps and the canvas was smeared red. That was the last time I tried to earn a seat at the Brooks family table. The night my father sent the group text declaring I was no longer his daughter, the night I was removed from the family chat, I was stationed at a forward operating base overseas. I had been awake for 31 hours running logistics for a high-threat extraction. My hands still smelled like gun oil and dust. The cot under me was hard and narrow, the plywood walls of my quarters covered in maps and mission schedules. I read the text message 3 times. I read Vanessa's heart emoji. I read Brandon's understood father. I watched the notification, "You have been removed from the group." I set a timer on my watch. 5 minutes. I allowed myself exactly 5 minutes to sit on the edge of my cot and stare at the plywood wall. The fluorescent tube above my head buzzed and flickered. A moth tapped against it in the silence. I counted my breaths. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. The same tactical breathing I used before a breach. When the timer beeped, I stood up. The daughter died in those 5 minutes, so the tactician took over. I picked up my phone and called my cousin Rebecca. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was shaking with disgust. She had already seen the group chat. But she had something worse to tell me. My father had not simply hidden my military career from his country club circle. He had erased me entirely and built a fiction in my place. At every charity gala, every golf tournament, every whiskey-soaked dinner at the Westbrook Country Club, Richard Brooks told the same polished lie. When anyone asked about his youngest daughter, he smiled, swirled his scotch, and said I was a high-ranking intelligence attaché, working in luxury at the U.S. Embassy in Paris. Paris. While I was eating sand and pulling shrapnel out of my soldiers in a combat zone, my father had me sipping champagne at a fictional embassy desk. While I was sleeping in body armor on a plywood cot, he told the Westbrook elite I was attending diplomatic cocktail parties in the French capital. I listened to Rebecca describe the lie without interrupting. A cold numbness spread through my chest, starting behind my sternum and radiating outward until my fingertips felt dead. He had not just rejected me, he had deleted the real me and invented a version he could brag about. The mud, the blood, the shrapnel, the bullet grazed the folding table. The Zippo lighter, none of it existed in his version. I was fiction, a character he wrote to protect his reputation. I thanked Rebecca. I hung up the phone. I opened my laptop. The screen glare cut white across my face in the dark room. I pulled up the screenshots Rebecca had secretly forwarded me over the past months. The text messages, the group chat logs. The second-hand accounts of the Paris attaché story from club members who had repeated it back to her at galas. I created an encrypted folder on my hard drive. I named it Evidence. I dragged every screenshot, every forwarded message, every piece of proof into that folder. I locked it with a 12-character password. I closed the laptop and slid it under my cot. The next morning, I blocked every phone number associated with the Brooks bloodline. My father, my mother, Vanessa, Brandon, every aunt, uncle, and cousin who had stood by and watched me get buried alive without lifting a finger. The only number I kept was Rebecca's. She was the only one inside the wire who had ever shown me loyalty. 4 years of absolute radio silence began that day. I refused every minor holiday invite that trickled in through distant relatives testing the waters on my father's behalf. I deleted voicemails from unknown Virginian numbers without pressing play. I channeled the rejection into fuel. I completed my Special Forces qualification, graduating top of my class in a program designed to break people who were already hard. I earned my major oak leaves, pinning them onto my collar in a small ceremony where not a single Brooks was present or invited. I built an investment portfolio that grew into 6 figures, checking the balance on my cracked phone screen at 2 a.m. between missions in countries whose names I cannot say out loud. I ran my body into the ground and rebuilt it stronger, turning the pain of rejection into the discipline of promotion. I learned the most dangerous enemy is not the one pointing a rifle at your chest across a valley. It is the one who shares your last name and smiles while they strip you for parts. The farmhouse sat at the end of a dirt road outside Fort Liberty, paint peeling off the porch rails, a tire swing hanging from an oak tree in the front yard, chickens scratching in the dirt near a fence that needed mending. I pulled my truck into the gravel driveway, killed the engine, and sat there for a full minute listening to the engine tick as it cooled down. David Hayes walked out the screen door carrying a 2-year-old girl on his hip. He set her down on the porch steps, and she immediately ran barefoot toward a mud puddle near the driveway. He did not chase her. He watched her with steady, patient eyes, the kind of eyes that had seen enough carnage to know which battles were worth fighting and which ones you let go. He had a scar near his left ear where the skin had healed, tight and shiny. An IED in Helmand Province took the hearing in that ear and killed 2 men in his squad. He spent 9 months in a VA hospital learning how to live with the ringing that never stopped. Afterward, he bought this farm with his disability check and his savings. A single father. A man who fixed tractors with greased hands and built fence posts in 90-degree heat and raised a little girl named Mia in a house with no air conditioning, 1 working bathroom, and more love in its creaking walls than the entire Brooks mansion had ever held. We sat on his wooden porch that first evening as the sun dropped below the tree line. He handed me a glass of cheap bourbon from a bottle with a peeling label. The glass was dusty. I drank half of it in one pull. He did not flinch. He waited. The porch boards creaked under our weight. Mia was chasing fireflies in the yard, catching them in her cupped hands and releasing them laughing each time the glow disappeared. I told him everything. I laid out the entire rod of the Brooks family like a mission debrief. The 4.1 GPA leash, the folding table at Thanksgiving, the Zippo lighter kicked under a tire, the Paris attaché lie, the group chat execution. I spoke in flat-clipped sentences the way I delivered field reports. No emotion, just data, just facts laid end-to-end like ammunition. When I finished, I expected pity. I expected the softening of the eyes, the head tilt, the hollow. I'm so sorry that people hand you when they have nothing real to offer. I had rehearsed my response to that pity in my head, already building the wall higher, already preparing to stand up and walk back to my truck. David's eyes did not soften. They stayed steel calm. He poured himself a second glass of bourbon. He looked at me across the porch, reading me the way a medic reads a casualty, checking the vitals, underneath the words, assessing whether the wound was survivable. Cheryl family isn't found on a DNA test paper. Family is the people who stand guard at your back when the whole world points a gun at you. He said it the same way he would call in a grid coordinate. No drama, no tremor. Just a fact delivered with the certainty of a man who had tested it against real bullets and real blood and real loss. I drank the rest of my bourbon. Something cracked open behind my ribs, something I had sealed shut the night that timer beeped in my barracks room 4 years ago. I did not cry. But the muscles in my face released for the first time in years. The tension in my jaw unlocked. The fist I had been making inside my chest loosened one finger at a time. I looked out at Mia, who was now covered head to toe in mud, laughing at a frog she had cornered near the fence post. 2 years later, we got married. No gold-foiled invitations. No country club reception. No ice sculptures or string quartets or guests who spent the evening ranking each other's net worth. I wore my crisp pressed dress uniform with every ribbon I had earned pinned in regulation order. David wore a dark suit with a plain white shirt, the top button open, because he said ties reminded him of nooses. Mia held a bouquet of wildflowers she had picked from the side of the dirt road that morning, half of them already wilting in her small fist. She wore a yellow sundress with mud on the hem from where she had knelt to pick the flowers. I signed the marriage license at the courthouse clerk's desk. Then I signed the legal papers to adopt Mia. The clerk looked at the adoption forms, then at me, then at Mia, who was spinning in circles in the lobby. The pen in my hand was steady. The clerk stamped the documents and handed them back. I slid them into a manila envelope and carried them out into the parking lot, holding Mia's hand with my free fingers. I built my new reality one board at a time. I watched David teach Mia how to tie her shoes on the porch, his big hands guiding her small fingers through the loops while she giggled and pulled the laces too tight. I cooked dinner in a kitchen with a leaking faucet and a window that stuck. I read bedtime stories in a voice that had spent the last decade giving combat orders. I locked the front door of our farmhouse every night, checking the deadbolt, twice a habit from the field that I never lost. For the first time in my adult life, I had a rear guard. Someone covering my six who would never sell the position for a country club membership. I closed my eyes on that porch and felt the ghosts from Virginia lose their grip one finger at a time. March 2024. 4 years of silence. 4 years of building. 4 years of letting the Brooks family believe I was rotting in some forgotten corner of the world while they clinked champagne glasses and repeated the Paris lie to anyone who would listen. Then a classified hostage rescue in the Middle East blew the lid off everything. I led a 12-person special forces team into a compound where 3 American contractors were being held by a militia group. The extraction lasted 9 hours. We breached 2 hardened positions and cleared 6 rooms under sustained fire. 2 of my operators took rounds. I carried one of them, a 26-year-old sergeant from Oklahoma who had a baby daughter he had never held, across 400 meters of open ground to the helicopter with his blood soaking through my vest and my legs burning from the sprint. We got all 3 hostages out alive. My sergeant survived surgery at Landstuhl. The Pentagon informed me within 72 hours that I was receiving the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest combat decoration in the United States Army. Only the Medal of Honor sits above it. I told no one outside my chain of command and David. I wanted the ceremony quiet, small, professional. No cameras, no spectacle. Just the medal, the handshake, and the record. But fate had other plans. And those plans started with my brother's biggest defense contracting client, 4-star General James Sterling. A phone call ripped me out of sleep at 2 a.m. I grabbed my cell off the nightstand and knocked over a glass of water in the dark. Rebecca's name glowed on the cracked screen. I answered, and her voice hit me breathless and fast, like she had sprinted to a bathroom to make the call in private. She described the scene at the Westbrook Country Club, a Saturday night gala. 200 guests. Champagne towers and a live jazz band, and women in gowns that cost more than a deployment bonus. General Sterling, 3 glasses deep into expensive scotch, spotted my father near the bar. The general crossed the room, slapped my father on the back hard enough to slosh the scotch in his glass, and announced at full volume in front of the entire elite crowd, "Richard, you hit it too well. Major Cheryl Brooks, your daughter, is a magnificent officer. She just saved my soldiers' lives in the Middle East. Next week, the Department of Defense is pinning a medal on her themselves." Rebecca described the silence that hit the room. 200 faces turning toward my father, champagne glasses frozen halfway to painted lips, his scotch glass suspended in midair. The Paris attaché, live, shattered into a million pieces on the marble floor of the Westbrook Country Club. There was no intelligence desk. There was no Parisian embassy. There was a combat soldier covered in other people's blood earning a medal that most officers never see in an entire career. And every person in that room now knew that Richard Brooks had been lying to their faces for 4 years. Rebecca described my father's face, rigid. His jaw locked so tight the tendons in his neck popped like cables. his eyes darting left and right, scanning for an exit, scanning for a story, scanning for a lie big enough to cover the last one. The country club Elias stared at him. Some of them whispered behind their glasses. Two men near the bar turned away from him entirely. The shame was total, suffocating, and inescapable. Then Rebecca's voice dropped lower. She warned me that the humiliation had triggered something far more dangerous than embarrassment. My father and Brandon were not just panicking. They were calculating. They realized my medal was a golden ticket. The DSC ceremony would be covered by Pentagon Press. Senior military officials would attend. For a defense contractor lawyer like Brandon, a handshake with a four-star general at a nationally covered ceremony was worth more than a year of cold calls. I hung up the phone and lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling fan spinning above our bed. David was awake beside me. He had heard every word through the phone speaker, his one good ear pressed against the pillow closest to my hand. I turned to him. The enemy has found our grid coordinates. David did not blink. He reached over and took my hand in the dark. His grip was steady, calloused, and warm. We both knew what was coming. The Brooks family was about to launch a full-scale invasion of my life. Not to apologize, not to reconcile, to conquer and exploit. Exactly 48 hours after the country club incident, an email landed in my inbox. From Richard Brooks. The subject line read, "Our family." I opened it at my kitchen table, my coffee going cold beside my elbow, David reading over my shoulder with his arms crossed. "Dear daughter, I've always been proud of you. Our family needs to reunite. At the upcoming medal ceremony, I will arrange for our family to be on stage on national television." Not a single word of apology. Not one syllable acknowledging the group chat, the text message, the folding table, the Zippo lighter, the 4 years of absolute silence. Just a tactical deployment order disguised as a father's love aimed at hijacking the spotlight of my sacrifice for his own reputation recovery. My phone started vibrating within the hour, voicemail after voicemail from Vanessa. Each one was a performance worthy of daytime television, her voice cracking with rehearsed sobs, calling me baby sis, for the first time in a decade, begging me to come home and heal this family. Between the fake tears, I could hear the click of her designer heels on marble and the muffled buzz of a salon blow dryer in the background. She was getting her hair done while she pretended to cry for me. Then Rebecca sent an encrypted text, a screenshot from the Brooks family group chat, the one I had been removed from 4 years ago, the one that still existed without me. My father's marching orders were written in the clear. Vanessa, wear a standout evening gown. Brandon, have your business cards ready. This is a golden opportunity for our firm to win over the generals. Let all of America see the Brooks family is a great patriotic family. I stared at that screenshot on my kitchen table. I read it 3 times. There it was. The entire Brooks family playbook laid bare in 4 sentences. My blood, my scars, my 9-hour firefight, my soldiers' lives reduced to a marketing opportunity and a networking event. Brandon wanted contracts. Vanessa wanted camera time. My father wanted his country club reputation stapled back together. Nobody wanted a daughter. I sat in my home office, my fists clenched on the desk so tight my knuckles turned white. The walls of the room pressed in. A tiny sliver of something old and biological tried to surface. A daughter's reflex, the muscle memory of wanting a father's approval even when the father does not deserve the title. It rose up from somewhere deep and ancient from the 18-year-old girl who still lived in a locked room behind my sternum. David walked in. He did not speak. He stood behind my chair, reached over my shoulder, took the mouse, and opened the evidence folder on my desktop. He clicked through the files until the old screenshot filled the screen. My father's words glowed against the dark background. I no longer consider her my daughter, a lowly, stupid grunt throwing herself into the mud to act as a meat shield for others. David looked at me. His jaw was set, his eyes were clear. He did not need to say the words out loud. A soldier never negotiates with a traitor. The hesitation died. The 18-year-old girl retreated behind the locked door. My spine straightened against the chair. My eyes locked onto the screen with the focus I reserved for mission-critical operations. They wanted to turn my blood and tears into a cheap PR stage. They wanted to stand behind me and smile for cameras while the nation pinned a medal on the daughter they threw into the garbage 4 years ago. I opened my email. I typed a 2-word reply to my father's message. See you. I closed the laptop. I looked at David. Iron your suit. We're going to let them walk right into a live minefield. David nodded once. He reached into the closet and pulled his dark suit off the hanger. Mia ran into the room and grabbed his leg. He picked her up. I watched them walk down the hallway together, my daughter's small hand patting the shoulder of the only man who had ever truly had my back. If you have ever had to sit silently while toxic relatives tried to steal credit for the life you built with your own 2 hands, hit the like button. Drop a comment telling me how you handled their fake smiles, because the trap I set for my family is about to snap shut. The Great Hall of the Pentagon. A room built to hold the weight of history. Marble columns rising 30 feet to the ceiling. Brass fixtures throwing warm light across rows of polished wooden chairs. 200 officers in dress uniforms, their medals catching the light like small fires pinned to their chests. Press cameras lined the back wall, red recording lights blinking in unison. American flags flanked the stage on both sides, their fabric perfectly still in the climate-controlled air. I sat in the front row, back straight, hands flat on my knees. My dress uniform was pressed so sharp the creases could cut paper. The Distinguished Service Cross sat in a velvet box on the podium, waiting. David sat to my left, his dark suit brushing against my sleeve. Mia sat to my right, her small feet swinging above the floor, a coloring book open on her lap. She was drawing a purple horse. I heard them before I saw them. The sharp click of expensive shoes on marble, the rustle of fabric that cost more than a sergeant's monthly pay. A cologne cloud so thick it reached me 3 rows before the bodies did. The Brooks family entered the Great Hall of the Pentagon like a theater troupe, taking the stage for opening night. My father wore a bespoke charcoal suit with a silk pocket square folded into a precise peak. His silver hair was combed back, his chin lifted at the angle he reserved for country club photo ops. Vanessa floated behind him in a floor-length emerald evening gown, her jewelry catching every camera flash in the room, her smile already calibrated for the press pool. Brandon walked at the rear, his hand resting on the breast pocket of his blazer, where a thick stack of embossed business cards bulged against the fabric. My father spotted the press cameras and switched on. He adjusted his cufflinks, broadened his shoulders, and projected his voice across the hall with the practiced authority of a man who had spent 30 years commanding boardrooms. I am the Major's father, the one who raised her to be successful. Heads turned, cameras pivoted. A murmur rippled through the uniformed crowd. 200 combat veterans watched a billionaire in a silk pocket square claim credit for a special forces officer. My father smiled and waved a manicured hand at the press pool, angling his jaw for the perfect shot. Brandon leaned over the back of my chair. His breath smelled like airport scotch. He tapped my shoulder twice with his index finger. Remember to introduce me to General Sterling later. His voice was the same voice he used to close 7-figure deals. I was a deal to him, a door to walk through. I did not turn my head. My jaw locked. My hands stayed flat on my knees. I breathed through my nose in a 4-count tactical rhythm. David's hand found mine between our chairs and squeezed once. A signal. Hold position. General Sarah Vance took the podium. A 3-star officer with 30 years of service, a Silver Star, and a reputation for reading a room the way a sniper reads wind. She adjusted the microphone, scanned the audience with the slow sweep of someone who had commanded battalions, and began. She spoke about my combat record, the hostage rescue, the operators I carried to safety, the 9 hours under fire. Her voice was measured, factual, and carried the weight of someone who had earned every word she spoke. Then her eyes cut to the back of the room, where my father was still positioning himself near the press cameras, adjusting his tie for the 3rd time. Her expression did not change, but her next words landed like a guided munition. She declared to the room that my success was built in the fire of combat, forged alongside my brothers and sisters in arms and supported solely by my one true rear guard. She extended her hand toward the front row. Her husband, David Hayes, a decorated combat medic who gave his hearing in service to this nation, and their daughter, Mia. Every camera in the room pivoted to David and Mia. Flashbulbs erupted. David straightened in his seat, his scarred hand resting on Mia's shoulder. Mia looked up from her coloring book, confused by the lights clutching her purple crayon. The press pool swarmed the front row. My father, Vanessa, and Brandon were pushed to the blurry, out-of-focus edges of every frame. Background noise, furniture. My father's smile cracked. I saw it happen in real time from the corner of my eye. The muscles in his face fighting to hold the performance while the spotlight he came to steal was ripped away from him and handed to a deaf veteran in a department store suit and a 6-year-old girl with crayon-stained fingers. General Vance stepped aside. My name was called. I stood. I marched up the stairs to the podium, my boots striking each step with precision. A general pinned the DSC to my chest. The weight of it settled against my sternum, heavy and real, the metal still cold from the velvet box. I leaned into the microphone. I thanked my fallen. I named the soldiers who did not come home from the operations I had led. I spoke their names slowly, deliberately, letting each one land in the silence of the room like a stone dropping into still water. I named Staff Sergeant Dunn, the man on the asphalt, who started all of this even though he had never served in my unit. I owed him that. Then I stopped. I lifted my eyes from my notes. I found my father's face in the crowd. He was standing near the center aisle, his chest puffed, already leaning forward on his toes, preparing to rush the stage for his moment. I leaned closer to the microphone. My voice was clear, calm, and carried the authority of a woman who had given commands under live fire with rounds snapping past her ears. And finally, I want to express my deepest gratitude to my true family, my husband David and my daughter Mia. Period. The silence that followed was suffocating. 200 officers sat frozen. The press cameras whirred. The word period echoed off the marble walls and died in the brass fixtures. My father's face contorted. The rage hit him like a physical blow, his nostrils flaring, the muscles around his mouth twitching, the vein in his temple throbbing. He lost the spotlight. He lost the narrative. And he lost control. He broke protocol. He stepped into the center aisle and rushed toward the stage, his leather shoes slapping against marble, his hands reaching for the microphone like a drowning man reaching for a life raft. Cheryl, I just wanted to say a few words about how proud our family is of... I stepped forward and blocked the microphone with my body. My frame was rigid, shoulders, squared feet planted. My voice did not waver. It echoed off the marble walls and brass fixtures with the resonance of a battlefield commander addressing her troops for the last time. Thank you for being here, Mr. Brooks, but the section for family has concluded. He stopped 3 feet from me. His face was red. His mouth worked, sputtering half-formed words. His hands dropped to his sides, then rose again, fingers shaking. The silk pocket square had come undone and hung crookedly from his breast pocket. I am your biological father. I stepped closer. Close enough to smell the cologne that cost more than my first month's military pay. Close enough to see the vein throbbing in his temple and the sweat beading at his hairline. I stared down at him from the elevated stage, and I unleashed the kill shot. 4 years ago, didn't you send a text declaring I was not your daughter? You called me a lowly, stupid grunt, throwing myself into the mud, a meat shield. You forbade everyone from mentioning my name. Right now, I am simply strictly executing your orders. My voice hit the back wall of the Great Hall and bounced off the marble like a rifle report. Every officer in the room heard it. Every camera recorded it. Every microphone captured it. The Pentagon security detail moved fast. 2 uniformed guards stepped forward, placed firm hands on my father's shoulders, and guided him back from the stage. His feet stumbled on the polished marble. His face had gone from red to a pale, blotchy white. The entire room of soldiers erupted. The applause started in the back rows and rolled forward like a wave chairs, scraping boots, stamping, 200 pairs of hands clapping in a thunderous wall of sound that covered my flank as I stepped back from the microphone. Officers rose to their feet. The standing ovation shook the brass fixtures on the walls. I did not smile. I stood at attention, the DSC heavy on my chest, and let the sound wash over me. David was on his feet in the front row, Mia in his arms, her small hands clapping along without understanding why everyone was standing. The ceremony ended. The press packed their cameras. Officers filed toward the exits, shaking hands and trading quiet words. I stepped off the stage, walked past the podium, and turned into the marble hallway that led toward the east wing. They ambushed me before I reached the second corridor. My father materialized from a side alcove, his bespoke suit wrinkled at the elbows, from where the security guards had gripped him. His face had gone from pale to a deep, mottled purple. The veins in his neck stood out like ropes. His silk tie was crooked. His fists were balled at his sides, knuckles white. "You dare humiliate me in front of the officials!" he screamed. His voice cracked on the last word, bouncing off the stone walls of the hallway and echoing down the corridor like a gunshot. I did not flinch. I did not step backward. I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out my phone, and opened the saved screenshot. His text message, his words, his declaration. I turned the glowing screen and held it 6 inches from his face. His own words stared back at him. I no longer consider her my daughter. His eyes locked on the screen, and for the first time in my life, I watched the certainty drain out of Richard Brooks like water from a cracked glass. His mouth opened. No sound came out. His hand reached toward the phone, and I pulled it back. I told him his own contempt dug this grave. I told him I did not put him in it. He crawled in himself, and he dragged his children in after him. Behind me, the press pool had followed the noise. Camera operators rounded the corner, their lenses already focused. Reporters pressed forward with recorders, raised, sensing blood. Vanessa panicked. She saw the cameras and her survival instincts fired. She needed to be in the frame. She needed to be seen. She needed to control the narrative. She shoved through the crowd of uniformed officers, her emerald gown catching on a chair leg, her heels clicking frantically on the marble. An older woman in a plain navy dress stood in her path near the corridor wall, watching the scene quietly. Vanessa threw her shoulder into the woman and pushed her against the marble. "Get out of the way, you country old hag! Don't block my camera time!" She shrieked, her voice ripping through the hallway like broken glass. The older woman caught herself against the wall with one hand. She was calm. She straightened her jacket. She turned around slowly. The security badge clipped to her lapel caught the overhead light, and the name and title printed on it were visible to everyone within 10 feet. Wife of the United States Secretary of Defense. Vanessa stopped breathing. Her mouth fell open. Her manicured fingers released the fabric of the woman's sleeve. 2 Secret Service agents materialized from the shadows near the corridor entrance, their hands hovering near their waists, their eyes locked on Vanessa like crosshairs. The blood drained from Vanessa's face so fast she swayed on her 5-inch heels and grabbed the wall for balance. Brandon was already unraveling at the other end of the hallway. The business cards in his pocket were worthless now. The networking opportunity was ashes. The handshake with General Sterling that was supposed to save his quarterly numbers had evaporated. He turned on me. His composure shattered, his face twisted with the kind of rage that only comes from a man watching his money disappear. He jabbed a shaking finger toward my face like a weapon. "Your poor lowly military trash only ruins the family reputation." He screamed it at full volume, spit flying from his lips, his voice reverberating off the stone columns of the Pentagon hallway. Every officer within 50 feet heard it. Every camera caught it. Every microphone recorded it. He did not check behind him. He did not scan the corridor. He did not do what any soldier would have done instinctively in a hostile environment. He did not check his 6. General Sterling stepped out from behind a marble pillar. The 4 stars on his chest gleamed under the hallway lights. He was 6'3" and built like the Cold War officer he had been for 30 years. He stopped within a foot of Brandon's back, his shadow falling over the lawyer like a thundercloud. Brandon sensed the presence and turned around. He walked directly into the chest of the most powerful procurement authority in the Department of Defense, the man whose contracts funded Brandon's entire firm, the man whose signature was on every quarterly revenue report that kept Brandon's partners from forcing him out. General Sterling's voice was low-controlled and terrifying in its calmness. Each word dropped into the hallway like a hammer hitting an anvil. "What did you just call my soldiers? Your law firm is permanently blacklisted from all Pentagon projects." Brandon's jaw dropped. The color left his face. His hand, the one still clutching the stack of embossed business cards, fell limp to his side. The card slipped through his fingers and scattered across the marble floor like confetti at a funeral. I stood in the center of the hallway. I watched 3 people who had terrorized me for 30 years collapse under the weight of their own arrogance in under 5 minutes. My father, purple-faced and sputtering against a wall, his silk pocket square on the floor. My sister frozen in front of the Secretary of Defense's wife, surrounded by Secret Service agents. My brother standing in a pile of his own business cards, staring up at the general who had just ended his career with 1 sentence. I did not gloat. I did not speak. I did not deliver a closing argument. The evidence spoke for itself. I turned my back on the Brooks family for the last time. I walked to David, who was standing at the end of the hallway, with Mia on his hip, her small hand gripping his collar. I took my daughter from his arms. She wrapped her hands around my neck and pressed her face against the collar of my uniform. Her breath was warm against my skin. I walked out the glass doors of the Pentagon into the afternoon light. The DSC metal was warm against my chest. Behind me, the sound of my father's voice cracked and faded into the stone. 1 year later, I sat at my kitchen table in the farmhouse, a mug of black coffee steaming beside my elbow. The morning light came through the window above the sink and fell across the scratched wooden surface where Mia ate her cereal every morning. Her bowl was in the drying rack. David's work boots stood by the back door, still caked with red clay from the yard. I reviewed the collateral damage the way I review after-action reports. Methodical, detached, factual. My father was expelled from the Westbrook Country Club within 3 months of the ceremony. 30 years of membership erased with a single vote from the board of directors. The Paris attaché lie had made him a laughingstock among the people whose opinions he valued more than his own children. The Pentagon hallway footage leaked by a press photographer who had captured every second of the confrontation went public and made it permanent. He was undergoing psychiatric treatment for what his doctor called narcissistic collapse. His second wife filed for divorce, citing irreparable damage to her social standing. He moved out of the mansion and into a 2-bedroom rental near the county line. Vanessa's medical license was suspended pending a review board investigation triggered by the incident with the Secretary of Defense's wife. The investigation unearthed billing irregularities in her cosmetic surgery practice, overbilling insurance companies for procedures she classified as reconstructive rather than elective. Her Instagram following the metric she valued more than her medical oath dropped by 40,000 in a single week after the hallway footage surfaced. Brandon's law firm filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy 6 months after General Sterling's blacklist took effect. Every pending Pentagon contract was voided overnight. His partners forced him out in an emergency board meeting. The Mercedes G-Wagon was repossessed from his driveway on a Tuesday morning, while his neighbors watched from their porches with their coffee cups raised. Their kingdom burned to the ground, and not a single match was lit by my hand. They built the pyre themselves, board by board, lie by lie. I simply stood back and let them climb on top of it. I pulled a handwritten envelope from the morning mail. The return address was written in shaky cursive, Richard Brooks. A Virginia address I did not recognize, smaller and cheaper than the one I grew up in. I slid a tactical knife through the paper seal. The blade cut clean. Inside was a 3-page letter handwritten on lined notebook paper, not the heavy cotton stationery he used to send from his mahogany desk. Cheap paper, drugstore pen. The handwriting was unsteady, the letters slanting downward at the end of each line. It was a desperate, rambling apology. He called me my little girl 4 times in the first paragraph. He begged for a meeting. He begged for his daughter back. He described his loneliness, his shame, his sleepless nights. He wrote that he finally understood what he had lost. 3 pages of words from a man who had never once used words to protect me. I read every line. I read it slowly, the way I read intelligence briefs, scanning for content and intent. My heart rate did not spike. My hands did not shake. I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not satisfaction. The words on the page were the words of a man who missed his status, not his daughter. He did not apologize for the text message. He did not apologize for the folding table or the Zippo lighter kicked under his tire or the 60th birthday blacklist. He apologized for the consequences. He was sorry he got caught. He was sorry he lost the country club. I folded the letter along its original creases. I pushed back from the kitchen table and carried it down the hallway to my home office. I opened the heavy metal drawer of my filing cabinet. The drawer slid on its tracks with a low groan. I pulled out a manila folder. The label on the tab read, Evidence, in my own handwriting, the same folder I'd created on a laptop in a plywood room overseas 4 years and a lifetime ago. I slid the apology letter into the folder, behind the screenshots, behind the group chat logs, behind 4 years of documented proof that the Brooks family had discarded me like surplus equipment and only came back when they smelled profit. I pushed the drawer shut. The metallic slam echoed through the quiet room and settled into the walls like the final round of a long firefight. I turned the lock. The key went into my pocket. I did not cry. I did not draft a reply. I refused to let the enemy back inside the wire. I walked back through the hallway past Mia's bedroom door, where her crayon drawings were taped to the frame, in crooked rows past the kitchen, where the coffee had gone cold, and out onto the wooden porch. The sun was warm on the farmhouse. The paint was still peeling on the porch rails. The tire swing hung motionless from the oak tree, waiting. David was in the yard pushing Mia on that tire swing, his steady hands guiding her back and forth while she kicked her legs and laughed loud enough to scatter the birds from the fence line. His bad ear was turned toward the wind. He did not need to hear her laughter to know it was there. He felt it through the rope in his hands. I leaned against the wooden post and crossed my arms over the metal that still hung inside my house on a hook by the front door. I watched my real squad in the morning light, the man who never once asked me to be anything other than what I am. The little girl who calls me mom and means it with her whole chest every single time. The war is over. The filing cabinet is locked. The letter will stay in that drawer until the paper turns to dust. I am exactly where I belong. Forgiveness does not mean letting toxic people back in to destroy your peace all over again. If you stand by my decision to lock that letter away and protect my real family, hit the like button and subscribe. Share your own story of setting boundaries in the comments below. I read every single one.